In this video, I'm going to show you how I built the cabinets for my office. First, I used my Craig rip-cut jig to cut down my plywood to the depth that I wanted. I used 4x8 foot birch plywood for this. After that, I used my track saw to rip the pieces I just cut to the height that I wanted. These pieces will make up the sides of the cabinets. I cut the pieces about ½ inch larger than the final dimensions so I can make the final cuts on the table saw. I set my table saw to the dimensions that I needed and made my final cuts. I also used this process to cut the bottom parts of my cabinet. Once I had my side pieces and bottom pieces cut to their final dimensions, I used a dado blade to create a slot near the bottom of the side pieces to fit the bottom board of the cabinet into. I first used a scrap piece of wood to make sure the width of my dado would perfectly fit the width of the plywood before making the cut near the bottom of each leg. Where you make the cut will depend on where you want the bottom part of your cabinet to be. Since I wanted to incorporate legs into the cabinet, I made the bottom about 7.5 inches from the ground. I then set my dado blade to 1/4 inches to fit the back part of the cabinet. This will be made out of 1/4 inch plywood. I used the 3/4 inch plywood to mark where from the back of the cabinets to make the cuts. I used the same pieces of 3/4 inch plywood to cut the legs for my cabinets. I first drew the shapes that I wanted on a piece of cling paper and then transferred it to my board. I cut the shape using a jigsaw. I then cut 3.5 inch slots to support the top and the back of the cabinets, cutting 4 of these per cabinet. I used my Craig pocket hole jig to make 2 pocket holes on each side of these support pieces. Finally, it was time to assemble my cabinet. I put glue into the slots and fit the bottom board into each dado in the leg. Then I screwed the support boards to the back and the top of the cabinet using pocket hole screws. I used 2 of these boards in the back with the pocket holes facing the back of the cabinet and 2 boards on top with the pocket holes facing the top of the cabinet. I clamped the cabinet together until the glue dried. Meanwhile, I used 1/4 inch plywood to cut the back panel to the height and width of the cabinet. I inserted this panel into the 1/4 inch dados. And here are the final carcasses. The next step was to build a frame. To do this, I first prepared the legs I made by applying joint compound to the edges of the plywood. This will create a smoother look after painting. I cut 1 by 2 inch poplar to length and drilled pocket holes at the ends of the boards. I then attached the pieces together. For the legs, I used wood glue to attach them to the frame. I put a few drops of CA glue in the ends and middle to create an instant bond, giving the wood glue some time to dry. I thought this was easier than using clamps given the legs were an odd shape, but you can definitely just clamp the legs to the frame as well if you don't have CA glue. I decided to create a cement-like top. I had a bunch of scrap 2x4s that I cut to the width of my nook. I used dominoes to glue them together. This helps align the boards during the glue up, but if you don't have a domino maker, you can definitely skip this step. Because these boards will be concealed from the top and bottom by cement, I didn't joint the sides. However, if you're doing a glue up where the boards will be visible, I would definitely recommend making sure that you have a perfect 90-degree angle on all of your sides before the glue up. This will help prevent any gaps between the boards. You can either use a jointer for this, or if you don't have one, my Ukrainian desk video shows you a handmade jig that you can use that will allow you to use your table saw to do this. Once the top was dried, I ran it through the planer to make the top and bottom flat. Then I mixed Henry's feather finish with water and brick dye to create a warmer tone and applied this all over the 2x4s. You don't need to add the dye, but it definitely helped warm up the gray. I had to do a few layers of this, smoothing slightly with 220 grit sandpaper between each layer. Finally, it was time to make the doors. I cut rails and stiles out of 1x3 poplar using my miter saw. I then used my router table to create a tenon in the rails or the horizontal parts of the doors. I then used my table saw to create a groove in the middle of each rail and stile. This will hold the center panel. I wanted to use this clover leaf patterned metal panel for the middle of the door, but if you don't want to have a see-through door, you can also use regular 1/4-inch plywood. I cut this metal to be slightly larger than the inside part of my door. I assembled my rails and one stile and fit the center panel into the groove before attaching the final stile. I let the glue dry and then lightly sanded and painted the doors. Once the doors were done, I attached them to the frame using Bloom Inset soft close hinges. I have another video where I show how I attach and mount these hinges, and it's in the same Ukrainian desk video, so be sure to check that out for more details on this step. Finally, I sealed my table using Miracle Sealant's 511 sealer and wiped off the excess after a few minutes per the directions. Here's the finished product. And if you haven't already seen my full office video, be sure to check that out to see how I made this whole office.